Hello, and welcome back after so long to Fanfic Friday. Been a while since we've been able to enjoy these particular stories, if enjoy is indeed the word that can be used. We'll give it a few minutes, see who pops in while I edit some settings, and then we'll get started. Hey, Jeff, welcome. Put that there. How is everyone today? Hello, Pablo. I don't know why, but I am tired. I slept pretty well last night, but something about the middle of the day makes me want to lay down and take a nap. Okay, let's get rid of that, move this, get rid of that, where'd it go? Here we go. Hey, Lobsol, Leon, welcome. Oh no, well at least they've figured out what's going on, Jeff. I hope you recover soon. Sorry that you keep having these issues. Ugh, what luck. Okay, let's see, we do that one and then, okay. Hey, Phil. Hey, is that? Let's take a look here. Are you a new member, Phil? Or am I just forgetting who's been a member? Let's see here, memberships. Phil, you're a new member! Welcome! How kind of you! Thank you for supporting the channel. And be sure to click in the description, the document in the description that gives you links and everything to all your benefits. Thank you so much. As I mentioned before, we're reading the last part of the Final Fantasy VII self-insert romance fic today. It is not finished. I can tell y'all what I had planned for it, but it ends on a pretty decent story note. Like, there's some conclusion for what's going on. Hey, Sky Center. So at the least it won't feel, I think, like it just drops off abruptly, but it does end today. I never finished the story. I got super distracted, because that's how I was. I would be obsessed with one project for a little while, and then, you know, a month later, be on to something else and never touch it again. Oh, well, thank you so much, Phil. That's very kind of you. Alright, so, we'll give it one more minute. For those who don't remember, let's see, this is a story where myself, I am transported to the world of Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children era-ish. I've moved in with Cloud and Tifa, and I'm hanging out with them, and I have feelings for Vincent. And he and I have been kind of going back and forth, flirting with one another, you know. Nothing really happening. Last time, I met Reno and snuck into Shinra headquarters to try and find information about how to send me home. And my friends were a little upset that I did all that without asking for help, because it is Shinra, and they are evil. But we are now opening up with me having returned home to my friends to tell them all about my great fun adventure with Reno and the gang. Let me move this down so I can see the slides. Alright, we should be good, and we will get started. Okay, if I push that... Okay, good, it still works. You what? I touched my ears gingerly, almost expecting to feel blood. But no, my hearing hadn't been destroyed by Cloud and Tifa's shocked, angry yelling. I almost wished it had, so I wouldn't have to suffer the lecture I knew was coming. See you later, Phil. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing, I explained frantically. Maybe if I had convinced them quickly of, well, the importance of what I'd done, I wouldn't have to sit and listen to two people almost 7 years younger than me treat me like their little sister. I had a chance, and I took it. You're damn lucky you didn't get arrested or hurt or worse. Being the motherly type, Tifa took it worse than Cloud. She was flustered, hands on her hips, pacing relentlessly around the kitchen. Luckily, bar hours were over, so we were alone. You should have contacted someone, Cloud told me. He was acting calmer, though there was a glint of fire in his eyes, which was scarier, an obviously pissed off Tifa or a quietly simmering Cloud Strife. I didn't want to find out. I didn't have the time. It was either do or don't. I sighed, shrugged, and held up the papers I'd stolen from Shinra. But we finally got a concrete lead. Didn't you trust us to help, to find something? Tifa returned, which I knew was coming. To my surprise, I didn't have to defend myself. We weren't exactly finding anything, Cloud muttered. If what she found is really a lead, he wasn't allowed to continue. If Shinra finds out you took this, there will be hell to pay. She grabbed the papers and a rush of panic went through me. Nobody will find out. They were in the basement in one of 20 cabinets in a folder this thick. I held my hands wide apart. There's no way! You know that. Nobody does paperwork. Not in Shinra. Frustrated, Tifa glanced at Cloud. The woman scoffed and threw her hands up in submission and then tossed the paper back to me. I took them and moved towards the table to sit with Cloud. Look! I placed the papers down on the table, beginning to flip through them and show Cloud the images. He seemed slightly impressed by how much I knew about them, as if they really were from my home world, which I knew he had trouble believing. If y'all don't remember from last time, the stuff that my character found in Shinra was like scans of a book that had images from Earth, of like the Eiffel Tower and the White House and stuff. And they're all from your world, each one? I nodded vigorously to answer his question. Cloud took the papers and began reading through them, sitting at the kitchen table. Tifa was cooking again, making nice with a dark grimace on her face. Cloud kept looking at the images, reading the small paragraph on the first page. She's right. This is the best lead we've gotten so far. My heart soared until Tifa spun around. So you don't care that Rufus Shinra almost got his hands on her? The woman roared, pointing the wooden spoon at me. Cloud let out a sigh and set the paper down. Of course I do, but like she said, she had a chance and she took it. Everything worked out. Ugh. Tifa spun towards me, gesturing with the spoon. At any other time, it would have been funny to watch food debris fly off the utensil over the kitchen. You can't just go gallivanting into danger. You don't even know how to fight. I know that. I knew she cared, but Tifa needed to lighten up. I may not act like it all the time, but I am a grown woman, not a child. I took a risk, but it paid off. Both of us glared darkly like the stubborn, hard-headed women we were. Tifa sighed. She was still angry, but resigned. She finally turned back to the cooking. The cooking. Not making a specific meal, just cooking. A big smile came over my face, and I turned to Cloud to talk again, almost not hearing her mumbled words. If Vincent were here, he'd agree with me. I glanced back at her and rolled my eyes. You do realize there are still sickos like Hojo in Shinra. That confused me. How was it relevant? Cloud looked very serious as he told Tifa, "Don't. There's no need." The woman spun around. No need? Maybe if she'd thought of it, she wouldn't have tried this stunt. Irritated and confused and tired of being yelled at, I spat, "Knew what?" A hand came to my shoulder and Cloud sighed. I turned back to him and calmed down. An image of my brother came to mind, and I felt a little better thinking of him and home. You're from another world. Something other than the life stream keeps you alive. I thought this through as Cloud kept explaining. You're different from everyone else on the planet. Imagine what Hojo would do if he got a hold of you, Tifa finished quietly. Her anger was still there, but it was simmering. It didn't matter to me. She'd made her point. A sick chill traveled down my spine as my head replayed every terrible scene of Hojo's madness and violence in my head. Oh, God. Exactly. Tifa saw the horrified look on my face and was satisfied that she'd gotten through to me. And you walked right into Shinra and told them who you were. Anybody could have heard, and Rufus isn't exactly the most trustworthy person either. My knees were weak, and luckily I was sitting down. Damn it, I hadn't thought of that at all. To a twisted psycho like Hojo, I was prime specimen material. I am a prime specimen. Shinra attracted all sorts of weirdo scientists. Another sick thought ran through me when I realized what Tifa had meant about siding with Vincent. Vincent's gonna freak when he finds out what I did, I muttered. Yep, and Tifa sounded a little pleased about that. Guess she thought I deserved it. Still, despite Tifa's disapproval and Vincent's imminent rage, we finally had a lead. I just had to be careful in the future, if I lived that long. Luckily for me, Vincent didn't return home that night. I would have been worried if I hadn't known Vincent often disappeared with no trace, and I really didn't want him to come home. Well, come home yet. Sure, I was dragging out the agony, but I was trying to think of the best way to explain why I had entered Shinra with a Turk without anyone else's knowledge. Thinking back, it had been pretty stupid, but Reno was just so nice, so disarming. I didn't even think of him as a Turk, but as a friend. Then again, it was his day off. But as I worked in the bar, I began thinking about it. What if it was all a ploy? False information Reno had been ordered to give me. But even as I thought that, I could think of no reason why they would do that. Besides, some instinct told me to trust Reno. Maybe it was coming from another world, but I knew Reno wasn't a bad guy. He was a Turk, first and foremost, so I'd have to be careful, but he had risked his hide for me. I trusted him, and I'd somehow have to explain that to Vincent, too. For the most part, I spent a week busying myself around the bar and worrying about how I would explain my behavior to Vincent. Eventually, I didn't even care if he killed me. I was going insane waiting for him to show up. Maybe he knew already, and he was torturing me on purpose. Somehow that didn't seem his style. Not to mention, Tifa hadn't really forgiven me yet either. She gave me the cold shoulder when we were working together. Most times I tried staying upstairs or outside with the kids, avoiding the angry brunette at all costs. Cloud seemed to take pity on me, understanding my desperation to go home and the reasoning behind what I'd done. I spent a good deal of time that week getting to know him better. I've been eyeing that bike of yours with a little envy, I admitted one night. The two of us were sitting on the back porch, watching the city in the setting sun over the high towers. Fenrir? Cloud smirked at me, then looked back out over the horizon. Many people cast jealous eyes over it. I smirked back at him. Proud, huh? I asked. The blonde chuckled and shrugged. Maybe. Where'd you get it? I asked. I had a suspicion where, but waited for his answer. Custom made, he explained. Did Sid make it? He turned to me, a little alarm on his face. But then I realized he probably didn't know I'd helped him and Sid get together. I smiled and shook my head. I know about the two of you. I didn't finish, just looked at him with a smirk on my face. Cloud rolled his eyes, a light flush on his cheeks. This was before that, but I guess, he sighed, I just hadn't accepted my feelings then. He and I worked on Fenrir together. I smiled. Got to know each other better, huh? More intimately? Cloud saw the devious look on my face and once again rolled his eyes, though I saw a smirk on his lips. There was one accident. Really? My face lit up. Despite everything, I was very curious. Cloud looked a little nervous and shy, but he began the story. I was working under the bike, lying down on one of those boards with wheels, which Cloud would know the word for because he is a mechanic, but I did not, apparently. Sid was working on something else nearby, and he didn't... The man smirked, and a little mirth showed in his eyes. He didn't know I had my music player on. I couldn't hear him calling my name. Suddenly I felt his hand on my ankle, and he pulled me out from under Fenrir, but he pulled too hard. Now he was really holding back laughter, and I felt the same happy feeling. I thought I knew where this was going. The board knocked him down, and he fell half on top of me, and he broke the board. We both burst into laughter. Seriously? I grinned at his cute blush. What happened next? Somehow the blush got worse, and Cloud glanced away. Well, it was awkward for both of us. Looking back, we both must have been shocked and trying to keep the other from knowing. He shrugged. Knowing your feelings? He nodded, and I giggled again. I'm sorry, but that's hilarious. How did Sid react? A snort escaped the blonde. After a minute, he leapt up, screeching about my damn hearing and what he was going to do to me and my Walkman. I shook my head. Love at first sight, I bet. Cloud rolled his eyes, but didn't disagree. Tifa did forgive me eventually, but I sadly managed to quickly do something else that set her off. It seemed she was destined to always be the pissed-off mother figure. It started the weekend before Christmas when I received a phone call from an unexpected but not unwelcome source. I was the only one in the bar, as Cloud and Tifa had taken the kids out Christmas shopping. The phone rang, and I hurried from the bathroom to get it. Just before the recording started, I picked it up. Seventh Heaven Bar and Strife Delivery Service. How may I help you? A chuckle came from the line. Well, you could tell me if you're free next Saturday. A dry smirk came to my lips. Hello, Reno. He seemed pleased I recognized him. How are ya? He asked. Still alive? Chuckling, I leaned against the counter and rolled my eyes. Barely. Not for long. Why's that? I explained how my escapade into Shinra was still a secret to Vincent, and I was awaiting the day that he returned and found out. Ooch. Reno was empathetic. I suppose he knew all about getting into trouble with overprotective friends. Elena and Song seemed to fit that bill. I guess it's a bad time to invite you back to Shinra, huh? Confused, I fell silent. Invite me to what? Next Saturday, Shinra's having their yearly Christmas party, the redhead explained, and I'm in need of a pretty date. Despite myself, I blushed. Sounds like fun. Reno's mood seemed to lift. You'll come? Won't that piss your friends off? They're my friends, not my parents. They'll forgive me, I told him. So is this formal? Yep. He was positively chipper, and I felt about the same. My stomach was doing backflips. You got something nice to wear? I'll find something. A big grin came over my face. My date explained the time and when he'd pick me up, and then we said our goodbyes. I'll see you then, Reno. I smiled, and he was laughing happily. See you, yo. As soon as I set the phone down, I cheered and danced around the office, a new skip in my step. A date! I hadn't been on one of those in ages. My boyfriend on Earth had been a cheapskate. Why hadn't I dumped him before the traveling planetary thing? Sure, Reno wasn't exactly my first choice for a date, but he wasn't last place either. He was a great guy, funny, and good-looking. He was a sweetheart and a friend. Thousands of girls back on Earth would have killed to be in my shoes. Hell, even I would have, and Reno wasn't really my favorite. But seeing as Sid was gay and Vincent would soon be out for my blood, those two were currently out of the question. So if I wanted to go on a date, Reno had to be my guy. Redheads were cute anyway. Is Reno a womanizer? People tend to characterize him that way, but there's not a lot of canon that really he dresses really saucily and he kind of flirts a little bit in dialogue, you know? So I think to that extent he's kind of seen as a bit of a playboy. He's kind of the fandom bicycle. I argued with myself about whether or not to tell Cloud and the others about my date, but since I was already in deep trouble, I figured keeping secrets would come back to haunt me. I don't like this, Tifa immediately muttered. Reno's not a bad guy, but Shinra, Cloud sighed. It's always dangerous, especially for someone unique like you. I think the word you're looking for is fucking nuts, I corrected, and Cloud smirked. That's 2 words. We shared a laugh before Tifa's angry glare silenced us. All of Shinra will be there. Employees from every department, she pointed out. Those creepy scientists who'd love to get their hands on you. Maybe they won't want to party and they'll stay home in their mother's basements. I offered. Tifa wasn't amused. She huffed and crossed her arms. Tifa's right. Some real creeps will be there. You'll have to be careful. Cloud told me, though he seemed only slightly concerned. The glare Tifa sent his way told me she didn't feel the same. But she gave in and frustratingly allowed me to go. I understood her home, but like a teenager sneaking out of house despite the risk, I was still going to the party. It promised to be a lot of fun. To show her disapproval of my going to the party, Tifa wouldn't lend me a dress. And since my funds were very low and Yuffie was nowhere near my size, I was in trouble. Reno might not mind if I went naked, but I would be embarrassed. Okay, that's the only problem. I really needed to find a dress to wear, so I called the one person who might be able to help. Who's this? Hi Sid, it's me. I smiled hearing his gruff voice. I guess I'd woken him up and I felt kind of bad. Oh hey, why are you calling so early? If I could have done the anime sweat drop, I would have. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Sid. Oh. Who's on the phone? I could tell Sid had turned from the phone to talk to someone else. It's Manda. Go back to sleep, huh? Immediately I smiled and giggled when I realized the other person was Cloud, and he and Sid had both been asleep. Aw, sorry to wake you up. I didn't know you slept in so late. Don't usually, but I was busy yesterday. Ah, I got it. Grinning, I decided to let it slide instead of making fun of the young lover, since I was trying to ask a favor. I see. Well, I'm calling to collect that favor you promised. Oh yeah, what can I do you for? Quickly explaining how I'd met Reno, which was interrupted and punctuated by angry cursing from Sid, I then told him of my upcoming date and my plight with my wardrobe. To my surprise, we didn't linger on my Shinra mistake for long. Sid seemed to understand why I took the risk and was only pissed I'd almost gotten hurt. I was touched. So what are you calling me for? He asked. I suppose it was weird to call him for clothing. Well, don't you still live with Shara? I asked. I had always liked Shara in the game, and though she'd shown up very little, I wasn't sure where she'd gone afterwards. I hoped she was still living with Sid. I thought I might be able to borrow something from her. Ah, fuck that. Surprised, I jumped at Sid's angry retort. What? Why? The woman has no sense of style. Doesn't wear nothing without that white jacket. Nah. He grunted and fell quiet for a moment. I could hear Cloud and Sid muttering quietly. Then he talked to me again. I'll be an edge in a jiff, alright? Wait for me. And then the phone clicked. I'd never been so confused in my life. An hour later, the doorbell rang, and before I could reach it, the door opened. A familiar blonde walking in. He looked just as rough and gruff as usual. Hey. Yo, I said before I thought about it, and then I rolled my eyes. I was even talking like Reno. Luckily, Sid either didn't notice or care because he didn't say anything. You ready? I blinked. Ready for what? Sid rolled his eyes and stepped forward, grabbing my arm and pulling me to the door. To get your dress, come on. I did a double take. Wait, what? Sid, where are we going? Cloud was waiting outside on Fenrir. Oh no, I missed a slide. What? Where'd my slide go? I liked that slide. It was fun to make. Oh, I got it out of order. Whoops, that's what happened. So we need to go... There we go. That's the slide that should be right there. Do I remember if Aerith was going to be in this fic? She was a ghost. She was in a part of a chapter earlier, but mostly she just showed up as like a mysterious ghost. Foreshadowing. Cloud was waiting outside on Fenrir and smiled when I came into view. Cloud, do you have any idea what your boyfriend's dragging me into? He smiled. Clothes shopping. Sorry, he can be a handful sometimes. You would know, Sid winked, and Cloud's face became 3 shades darker. I was a little lost in the idea of shopping for clothes with Cloud and Sid. I don't have any money, and you guys are guys. I know gay people are supposedly all about style, but I don't think Cloud's that fabulous, and I know you aren't, Sid. Get on the bike. Sid put his hands on his hips and demanded it, so still confused, I followed his order. Stepping towards Fenrir, I realized my dream of riding it was going to become true. Wait. Who sits where? I gawked. Fenrir was big, sure, but there was me and 2 dudes. Girls in the middle, Sid demanded, shoving me forward. Play nice, his boyfriend demanded. Sid just grinned. So against my better judgment, I threw my leg and wrapped my arms around Cloud's waist. I have to admit, I was excited to be riding Fenrir, but then Sid got behind me and my excitement died and was reborn as awkward butterflies in my stomach. It felt more like weapons were flying around inside me, causing havoc. Weapons being a giant monster in Final Fantasy VII. Oh my god. Oh, he was right behind me, and I could even smell him. My mother was right when she told me smoking was a bad habit, but a sexy one. Sid smelled gorgeous. Ah! That is something my mom used to she'd always talk about how smoking was one of his worst habits, but that it was always such a romantic scent to her because it was what he smelled like. Like, oh man. Oh my god. Oh. Oh god. He didn't wrap his arms around my waist. Too cool, I suppose. But he did set his hands on my hips. Great, Sid. Just make me more attracted to you and uncomfortable in this situation. I did mention before he had large calloused hands that felt warm. And then in italics is the mantra where apparently my character is chanting, Sid is Clouds, Sid is gay. Sid is Clouds, Sid is gay. Before I knew it, we were off, and I squeaked and leaned into Cloud's back. Oh, God, no! Both men chuckled, and Sid suddenly leaned forward against me. I could feel his chest on my back and his breath on my ear. First time, he asked. Sid took my reaction as fear rather than shock. He squeezed my hip reassuringly, but that did not help. Don't worry. Bikes are safe, especially when Cloud's driving. You'll be fine. Uh-huh. Sure. I will be as soon as you let me go and stop being so damn sexy. We could not arrive at the store soon enough. Finally we did, and Cloud shut the bike off. I leapt off Fenrir like I was in a Die Hard movie, and the vehicle was about to explode. What does that mean? What does that mean? Oh. Both Sid and Cloud stared. I thought you wanted to ride Fenrir, Cloud asked. Nodding, I decided to use fear as my cover-up. Yeah, I just didn't know it went so fast. Seeing and talking to Cloud helped me calm down and remember Sid was totally out of bounds. My heart started to slow back down and the color began leaving my cheeks. But they both still seemed worried. I'm fine, really. Alright, maybe you should use the train to get home, Cloud said as Sid got off, but the other blonde remained on the bike. Aren't you coming too? I asked fearfully. Don't leave me, Cloud. Not a good idea, Cloud. Do not leave me alone with your boyfriend, Cloud. The spiky-haired one nodded and my heart plummeted. Got some more deliveries to make. I'll be around for dinner, he promised. He and Sid had their romantic goodbye, and then Cloud was off, Fenrir roaring in the distance. Okay, now he's shopping. You coming? Sid was already at the doors to the store, while I stared helplessly after Cloud and Fenrir. Self-control, don't fail me now. As it turns out, gay people do all have fashion sense, even the ones that are not fabulous. Crap, crap, shitload of crap. Sid kept tossing my choices back at me, and I had to hustle to catch them all. I felt like I was performing a balancing act. Every dress I picked out had some problem with it, but Sid usually wouldn't elaborate. It was either, you could do better, or crap, or shitload of crap, or damn, hang on to this one. So far, only 2 of the latter had come up. The first dress Sid had liked was a blue one which shimmered slightly, a V-neck that tied around the neck and went to my knees. It was slightly longer on the right side. The second was a black cocktail dress, like in the movies. It wasn't my favorite, but Sid told me to hang on to it, so I did. What the hell's wrong with you? Your mother buy you shit like this? Sid asked as he frowned at a flowery brown printed dress I'd picked out. Pouting, I stuck my tongue out at him. My mother has fantastic taste. A little kooky, but who isn't? He threw the brown print at me and it fell over my head. As I struggled to remove it, Sid began looking through more clothing. Kooky? Like what? I chuckled a little. How to explain my mother? Oh dear, how? Well, she's 17 at heart, but 3 times that age. Tired of lugging around the nose, I dumped them all in a chair for someone else to deal with. She's really ADD and Irish. Sid glanced over his shoulder. What's the hell's that? Oh, right. Chuckling, I shook my head at my mistake. I guess that's something only someone from home would get. Sid's eyes went wide and he glanced away. Huh. Well, you still haven't told me what it is. He kept looking through clothes on the rack. I figured since my taste was bad, according to Sid, I'd sit down and let him look. So I sat on the floor next to the chair full of clothes. Well, it's a country where I came from. You know, like Wutai, way out there. It's an island where people have a reputation of being fun-loving and stubborn. And my mom's family was from there. Your mom sounds like me, Sid laughed. On the other hand, I fumbled and gawked at him. On the other hand, I fumbled? That doesn't make sense. Wow, she kinda does. I had to laugh too, even though the image of my mom as Sid was a horrible mindfuck. You don't sound too much like that, though. Oh my god. Oh my god. Sid picked up a green dress and turned towards me as if imagining what I might look like in it. Then he muttered crap and put it back. You're pretty level-headed, but you are damn stubborn. It's true. But I have a bad temper if you rile me up. For some reason, that made him laugh. Really? Can't imagine it. You're like Cloud, wrapped up in thinking all the time. Me? Like Cloud? I was imagining myself as Cloud. But that was weird. God, this is... Yeah, I get that from my dad. He's got a mean temper, but everybody on his side of the family does. Like, it's part of our inheritance. Oh, God. This is a lot. I feel bad for the fella you bring home, then, he chuckled. A thought crossed my mind then. What about you? What would your parents think of you and Cloud? He seemed taken surprised by my question and slowly returned the dresses to the rack. Well, my dad hated gay shit. Probably would have beat me up or something. Didn't even suspect back then, though. I dated plenty of chicks. Sid put his hands in his pockets and looked around at the carpet. So you liked both? He looked up and nodded. Yeah. Me too, I said quickly. I glanced away before I could gauge his response. I suppose it's silly to fear rejection for being bi from another, but that's how the mind works. Really, he seemed surprised more than anything. I risked a look and saw a smile. He understood my fear because he'd felt it before. Yeah, I've always liked both. Huh. That made Sid cross his arms and smirk. So, what's your type of woman? A big grin crossed my face as I imagined my type. Someone like Tifa. Sid and I both shared a laugh. That's everyone's type. I stood and swatted his shoulder. I like more than her assets. He burst into laughter and I hit him again. I just mean I like someone that's strong, you know? Yeah, we are back to Teenage Muse working through things hour, which is just all the fanfic. The whole hour is that. Ugh. I get it. Lay off. We were both smiling, and I felt a lot better than I had earlier. Sid held up the dresses he's been holding. There were 12 now, I counted. Time to play dress up, he grinned. I groaned. I hated trying on clothes, but the muscular, hot gay man would not let me go without trying all his pics on. I had to admit he had really nice taste, and luckily once I had the dress on, it didn't take him long to either say, fuck yes, that's perfect, or shit, that one's out. In the end, we were down to 3, and it was my pick. I chose the original blue shimmering dress, which I'd found myself strangely attached to. Sid insisted on paying for it against my will, but since I didn't have much money, I had to let him pay. And after that, since it was still pretty early, he dragged me to the shoe section. But he wasn't done there. Apparently I just had to have a necklace and some earrings too. Poor Sid was going to go into debt for me. But we both had a blast, talking about my home and his, and all sorts of things. I felt like I was becoming closer to him as a friend. As we walked out of the store together, I found it a little more difficult to make small talk. That awkward feeling had come back with a vengeance. Glancing at him out of the corner of my eye, I wondered what he was thinking about. Was he thinking of Cloud? Thanks for doing this. You really didn't have to, I said. It was fun, he grinned at me. But I don't do this often, so don't expect it in the future, alright? I giggled and nodded. I couldn't see you as being much into clothes shopping anyway. We both shared a chuckle at the image. Once out of the store, Sid led the way to the train station. I kept thinking about stuff, and suddenly a question came to me that I just had to ask. Oh, hey Sid! I ran up to him, tugged on his sleeve. He glanced back at me. With my biggest, most innocent grin, I asked, So who's on top? Sid blinked. What? With you and Cloud. Who's on top? There was silence for a moment, and then Sid's face became redder than Reno's hair. What the fuck, woman? Oh my god. 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 Okay, well, that's chapter 6 done. No, chapter 5 done. Now we're to the last chapter. Oh, jeez. Here we go forward. Alright. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, man. The end of the week couldn't come quickly enough. Not only was Christmas right around the corner, my date was approaching too, and I was very excited. To my surprise and relief, Vincent still hadn't shown back up. He hadn't called at all either, which I suppose wasn't too surprising, but I felt a strange sense of foreboding. I had a bad feeling he was going to show up soon. Until then, I concentrated on working around the bar and getting ready for my date. Getting ready mostly was just me daydreaming about Saturday and staring at my dress. This usually ended badly, though. It made me remember my time with Sid and all the awkward feelings I'd felt. I'd had a great time and gotten to know him better, but I had a feeling getting to know him wasn't a good idea. I'd only end up getting hurt. God, this... I'm into him, and I'm into him, and I'm into him, and I'm into her. Oh my god. How do I look? I heard a deep sigh as I turned around and saw Tifa still looked slightly disapproving, but she nodded. Sid has good taste. She got off the wall she'd been leaning on and walked over. Who knew I didn't take him for that sort of guy? A sharp pang hit my stomach. I'd forgotten that Tifa was still ignorant of Sid and Cloud, not only being gay, but together. In my heart, I thought she needed to know, but Sid and Cloud hadn't told her. But I didn't want to be the bearer of more bad news. Not yet. So I postponed telling the truth and smiled. He's a strange one, huh? She and I shared a small laugh I didn't quite feel. But still, it was going to be a good night. It was finally Saturday and time for the dance. Time for me to go on my date with Reno and forget all about my confusing feelings for Sid and my impending doom whenever Vincent came home. I was also kind of nervous. All of Tifa's fear-mongering was kind of getting to me. What if this was a big stupid mistake on my part? Well, my pride wouldn't allow me to back down, plus I really did want to go have a good time with Reno. Bailing now would only break his heart. So that night, I could be found on the first floor of the house, waiting in the bar for Reno to show. I'd already had one drink to calm my nerves, but I hadn't really finished it. The door rang, and like a girl waiting for her prom date, I giggled and leapt up. Please be him! I raced to the door. But I stopped. You don't want to look too excited, so I slowed down, opened the door slowly, and smiled. Soon as I saw who was at the door, my smile died. There was a long, quiet pause, and I didn't move. Vincent gave me a strange look. Are you going to let me in? It took another minute to convince my legs to move, but I did. My heart was hammering in my chest as I did, and Vincent's eyes didn't leave me for a second. Even though he looked concerned, I didn't feel better. I was afraid he'd see right into my mind and know exactly what I'd done. He came in and I shut the door as my hands were shaking. He came in and shut the door for me as my hands were shaking and I was unable to do so myself. Now he seemed really concerned and also confused about my dress. His eyes traveled over me and I felt very self-conscious. I tried saying something. Well, how do I look? It came out kind of quiet, but at least I was talking. Vincent's eyes returned to my face. You look nice. For some reason, that didn't really make me feel any better. It actually kind of hurt a little. It just didn't feel like a real compliment. Vincent seemed a little out of sorts for some reason. Where have you been all this time? I asked. For a moment, the man didn't speak. Are you going somewhere tonight? Suddenly, I was hit with an image. I was still dressed nicely, still waiting at the bar, but it was Vincent walking in, with his hair pulled back, a black suit with an actual smile on his face. He'd take me by the arm, and as we went on a date together, eating a nice meal at some fancy place, afterwards we could dress in warmer clothes and go ice skating somewhere, or just sit inside with hot cocoa and snuggle up. As long as we were together, it wouldn't matter. My daydream shattered quickly, and I was beginning to realize I'd made a bigger mistake than I'd thought. My voice was strained, and Vincent could tell because he looked almost frightened. I'm going on a date, I whispered. He turned away. I see. We both fell quiet. It was awkward, and it seemed neither of us wanted to make the first move. I wanted to leave, but was afraid of doing so, as if he'd disappear and I'd never see him again. Footsteps came from the stairwell, and Marlene entered the room. The little girl gasped at the tall man in red, running to him and hugging him tight around the leg. Vincent! She grinned at him with a disarming innocence. I took the chance to turn and walk out the door, shutting it behind me quickly. My heart was racing in my chest as I turned and walked down the sidewalk. I realized it would be best for me to remove my high heels, so I did so, holding them as I broke into a run. I began counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. As I did, I kept running, doing my best to remember the route I'd taken to Shinra, trying to go back to the building where the party would be. I ran even faster. What? The loud roar-like scream from the distance behind me actually hurt my ears. What do you know? It had taken 36 seconds for Vincent to find out what had happened. Suddenly, I ran like my life depended on it, and in a way, it might have. I heard a loud bang and more shouting. Vincent was now out on the street and running after me. I was in trouble. Even if Vincent was not super powerful and gifted with the abilities of demons, his long legs would easily overtake mine. Not to mention, I didn't really have any idea of where I was going. I was supposed to wait for Reno to wake me up and pick me up, but my pride made me continue to run, even as I heard his boots clicking against the cement, getting dangerously close. Then an arm wrapped around my waist, and I was suddenly hoisted into the air off my feet. I dropped my heels and grabbed the appendage, trying to pull it off, but when that didn't work, his other arm came up around my chest. Even though his arms looked thin and frail, they were like steel. I couldn't get them off. But I'm stubborn. Even though I'm stubborn, I knew when to quit. I was tired anyway, so I settled down. After a moment, he set me on his feet, but set me on my feet, but he didn't remove his arms. Aw, thank you, Gerard? I hope I said that right. I'm glad you like my stuff. Were you going to tell me about your adventure? He murmured against my ear. It was malicious the way he spoke, but it made me shiver. I'm going to shiver a lot in this story. There's a lot of murmurings and shivers. I figured somebody else would say something, I admitted. I hadn't really wanted to tell him about it face to face. I would have, I was afraid you weren't going to let me leave tonight if I told you. You were right, Vincent told me. We both fell quiet for a moment. Neither of us really had anything to say. Eventually, Vincent let me go, and I turned around. Another shudder ran through me at the sight of him. His eyes were positively flaring. His rage was showing through. In a strange way, it was kind of a turn-on. I'd never seen him so emotional before. I never took you for a fool, he seethed. His words were so laced with malice, they really did hurt. I winced, but it didn't bother him. Shinra is no place to wander into mindlessly. You could have been hurt badly. Do you have any idea what could have happened? He frowned, his voice growing louder. I nodded and avoided his eyes. Cloud and Tifa enlightened me to that. Good, he sneered. Then he reached out and took a surprisingly gentle hold of my wrist. Let's go. I guess that was that, to him at least, but I began to protest. Vincent, He spun back around, eyes red, but tinged with the yellow of chaos. Don't. You aren't going anywhere near that building. Was that a growl I heard? Sure enough, fangs were showing over his pale lips as he growled menacingly. I heard the sound of Fenrir's engine, and a moment later the bike came into view nearby. Its owner pulled it to a stop and left off, running towards us. Cloud, my savior! Vincent! I could tell he was concerned the man might have lost control. What's going on? The man blinked, and some of the rage left his eyes. He let go of my wrist and turned towards the blonde. They began talking as I let out a sigh of relief. Psst! I hung my head, trying to think of a way out of the situation. Poor Reno. It looked like I was going to disappoint him. Psst! I'd been really looking forward to the party. Sure, I would have rather gone with Vincent, but since he was currently acting like a domineering demon, I wasn't going anywhere with him. Reno would have been a fun date anyway. Psst! Jumping, I turned around and saw, crouching behind a nearby trash can, was a familiar redhead. He grinned at me and waved his hand to call me to him. I glanced back. Vincent and Cloud were in a heated discussion. Neither of them were looking at me. Looking back at Reno, I saw him wink conspiratorially and I smiled. Well, if I was going to die tonight, I might as well die happy. Slowly, I inched back towards Reno, further and further, as he stood. He took my hand and led me behind the building, and once we were further away, we ran like there was no tomorrow, laughing the whole way. I left my shoes back there! What's it matter? Reno laughed, looking down at my poor red feet. The cement was not good for them. You don't need high heels to look pretty. He winked at me, and I'll admit my face flushed a little. My feet hurt like hell is what matters, I told him, grinning like an idiot. We were both breathing hard from running. But we now stood outside the Shinra building, waiting in a line to get in. We were both still chuckling. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so rude. Reno shook his head like he was admonishing himself, and then suddenly wrapped an arm around my waist. I yelped when his other arm went under my knees, and he picked me up. Reno? What? He asked innocently as I began laughing again. I can walk. He ignored me and kept walking with the line, a debonair smirk on his face. Someone looked proud of themselves. Don't worry about it. It's my fault you left your shoes behind. I can at least carry you into the building. Since my feet did hurt, I gave in with a smirk of my own and a roll of my eyes. You know, most girls don't get carried over the threshold on the first date, I told him. Reno shrugged proudly. What can I say? I'm irresistible. I laughed, head falling back, until my eyes saw over Reno's shoulder. Something off in the distance gave me a bad feeling. Reno? Yeah, babe? Nervously, I wrapped my arms around Reno's neck and held on tight. Is that what I think it is? The Turk turned to look down the street. After a moment, his eyes went wide. Oh, shit! Reno spun back to the line and immediately began moving forward. Okay, everybody, emergency! Medical emergency! Everybody out of the way! I glanced back over Reno's shoulder. Yep, that was definitely Vincent's form coming towards us, his aura sparking with rage. I could quite literally see his demonic energy floating around him, and it was pretty frightening. Cloud was nowhere to be seen. Reno was right. If Vincent caught up to us, it was going to be a medical emergency. Oh, bye, Sky Center. Hope everything works out and you feel better. Have a good one. Coming through! Coming through! Reno was pushing through the crowd of people, still holding me in his arms. Out of the way, now! People turned to look at us in surprise, and I shut my eyes as Reno raced through. Come on, let me cut you. He began looking at each person as they passed. You owe me a favor? You owe me a favor? I've got blackmail on you. Oh, you were a great lay. He paused for a sec to wink at a blonde minx nearby who smirked at him. Reno! I punched his shoulder, and he remembered what was at stake. Oh, come on, everybody move! Vincent was running towards us and getting dangerously close. His stare was burning into me, and I burrowed like a child into Reno's collar. I heard a demonic roar just as Reno leapt through the doors of the Shinra building and raced into the nearby elevator. What a romantic evening. This is what my first date was like, obviously. Yeah, this is definitely the ideal first date. Running from demons, barefoot, you know. The elevator door began closing shut as Reno set me down. As it closed, I could see through the door outside was Vincent, his mouth set in a hard line. Oh boy. We're so dead. I leaned against the wall, heart beating fast. So very dead. For now we're alive, Reno assured me, hand on my shoulder. How do you figure? He smirked. There's no way a man like Vincent would burst into this party and make a scene, so for now, we're safe, Reno assured me, moving his arm around my shoulder. As I thought about it, I realized he was probably right. For now, we had a moment's reprieve. But after the party... I sighed and closed my eyes. I'd take whatever Vincent could dish out later. For now, I wanted to have fun. When the elevator door opened, it opened to a winter wonderland, and as I entered it being held by Reno, a smile came upon my face. Rufus Shinra hosts a damn good party. The decorations were gorgeous. It looked like the North Pole, but a more professional version. Everything was glimmering in white. It wasn't a really full party, which made sense since Shinra had cut down in recent years, but it was beautiful. I couldn't help but giggle. This was so cool. Reno heard me and chuckled. Enjoying it already? I nodded. This is amazing. Thanks for inviting me. He smirked down at me. Anytime, babe. Then he laughed again. You still don't have any shoes. I looked down and shrugged. Could be worse. A Shinra party is very glamorous. Most of those present sneered at both Reno and I. More than likely because I wasn't part of the rich or the Shinra elite, and I wasn't wearing shoes. And at Reno, because he could be a pretty pesky troublemaker. It was just water off his back, though, so I didn't let it bother me either. Almost as soon as we entered the room, Reno introduced me to his circle, Rude and Song. Of course, I already knew them, and I had met Rude in passing, but it was still cool to be introduced to them. Yo, guys! Reno waved and smiled, pulling me over towards them. Meet my date. He proceeded to share our names, and after a moment, I noticed Rude and Song were both looking at me strangely. They both glanced at Reno at the same time. What? He shrugged. Rude rolled his eyes behind his sunglasses, and Song sighed. Had I missed something? Rude extended a hand to me, and I took it. It's nice to meet you, he said, smirking. He was laughing at a joke I apparently had missed. Nice to meet you, I said. I glanced at Reno, who just smiled sheepishly at me. You must be a brave woman to attend with Reno, Song joked, smiling lightly. He looked nice when he smiled. I grinned back. I like a challenge, I responded. He seemed to like that answer. Reno put a hand on my shoulder and moved closer to me. Hey, don't start insulting me on the first date. We talked for a few minutes while Reno ran off to get us some drinks. I was left with Rude and Song, and of course the matter of my naked feet came up. I turned slightly pink and laughed despite myself. I'm afraid getting here was quite the adventure. I began explaining in short how a friend of mine had been very angry at both Reno and I'd had to run to get here. Maybe you're not such a bad match for Reno, Song chuckled at me. I blinked. Rude explained what the older man had meant. Sounds like the kind of trouble Reno would be part of. Understanding, I laughed. Talking about me? Reno showed back up, holding my drink in his hands. I took it and thanked him. Only good stuff, right? Sure. He stuck his tongue out at me and put his hand around my waist. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed and became downright venomous. I shivered. Vincent couldn't have come in, could he? No, I quickly realized it had nothing to do with him, as a deeply frowning blonde woman stalked up, heels clicking on the floor. Oh, wonderful, Song sighed and turned away. Rude sent a dark glare Reno's way, but the redhead ignored it. Before I could ask what was going on, the blonde was right in front of us, standing with her arms crossed. Hello, Reno, she sneered at him, then at me. What was her problem? Hello, Elena, Reno replied cheerfully. Oh, I knew her. She was the newbie Turk from the game. I didn't much care for her, but I didn't think she was this mean. Her eyes fell on me and her sneer became worse. What was up? So, are you going to introduce us? She asked darkly. At the sound of her evil tone, I almost felt like taking my chances with Vincent outside. Sure will. Reno wasn't bothered at all, though I noticed that both Rude and Song were backing away slowly. Reno introduced us, but I don't think either Elena or I were listening. She was too busy trying to set me on fire with her eyes. What's your problem? I finally asked. Her eyebrows flew into her hair. My problem? She asked, hands on her hips. I'm not the one gallivanting around with someone else's man. Wait. What? Huh? I glanced from the blonde to Reno, who suddenly looked very nervous. Song and Rude backed further away. A look of true cruelty came to her face then. She gestured to the redhead beside me. Reno is my boyfriend, Elena said. My jaw dropped. Song and Rude were nowhere to be seen. Boyfriend? I asked again. I looked at Reno, who was now sweating. You didn't know? Elena asked. She glared at Reno. Well, girls... Reno chuckled nervously. Frowning, I turned to glare at him. I always known he'd been sort of a flirt, but I didn't think he was a jerk. With both of us glaring at him, Reno seemed to falter in his words. The more the merrier? I was about to rip him a new one, and so was Elena, when suddenly the people on the other side of the room began shouting obscenities. I would have blamed it on Reno if he hadn't been standing next to me. Elena spun around when the shouting started, and Reno took the chance to grab my arm and drag me away. I protested, but he was much stronger than he looks, and quicker too. In a flash, he had me away from Elena and then out of the main ballroom, taking me down a side hall into an empty sitting room nearby. He pushed me in, shut the door behind me, and breathed a sigh of relief. Then he turned around and saw the look on my face. "Reno!" I shouted. He tried to shush me, and I ignored him. "How could you do that? To her? To me?" He rushed over and put his hands over my mouth. I was about to bite him when he started talking. "There's a perfectly good explanation if you care to listen, all right?" He begged, clearly exasperated. Sighing, I gave in and nodded. Reno removed his hand and gestured to a seat. We both sat down, and I waited for Reno to explain himself. He was actually blushing, which was kind of cute, but I forced myself to remember I was incredibly angry with him. "Okay, so yeah, Elena and I were dating, and I'm sorry I brought you here without telling you that. It was nice to hear, and he did look repentant. The truth is, she can be a little standoffish sometimes. Kind of a bitch." I smirked, and he rolled his eyes. "She's kind of been distant lately. Were you trying to make her jealous? She just brushes me off all the time. It's like I'm only good enough to work with her on missions or anything. And it can't be her job. I'm higher ranking than her and got more work to do, but I always make time to go out with her." The man frowned sadly. "She just doesn't take me seriously. I know I'm a joker, but I've got important stuff to say too. But when I try to have a real conversation about it, she just brushes me off." "Oh, honey." I stood up and walked over to him, hugging him around the shoulder. He sighed and leaned his head against my neck. "I'm sorry, but I don't think this was the best way to go about getting her attention." "Well, it did work," he chuckled humorously, gripping my hand. I rolled my eyes and leaned away from him. "Wouldn't it be better to just sit her down and talk to her?" "Hello," Reno shrugged. "Like I said, I tried. She never listens to me." Frowning, I tried to think of another solution. Maybe I could talk to her. Reno huffed. He stood up and moved towards the nearby windows. Taking hold of the handle, he moved to partly open it. I could use some fresh... Ah! Holy shit! I jumped to my feet, startled at the resounding roar that had come from outside the window. Reno slammed the window shut, closed the curtains tight, then ran back over to me and sat down. His hair was literally blown back like in a cartoon show. "I think I've had enough fresh air now," he muttered quietly, eye twitching slightly. I stood and moved towards the window. "Was that really—" Reno reached up and grabbed my wrist. No, that wasn't Vincent. That was the evil Vincent," Reno said, keeping me from moving. He glanced down. "What's the story with him anyway?" I sighed and shrugged. "Well, he didn't want me coming here because of the whole Shinra debacle a while back." Reno nodded knowingly. "But I never thought he'd act like this. This isn't normal for Vincent." "Yeah, I know that, and I'm not even his friend." Reno glanced at the window and back. "Are you two—" I flushed scarlet. I wished. Confused, Reno motioned for me to sit this time. "Then why are you here with me?" "Well," I sighed, "I've been really stressed out the last couple months for obvious reasons. I thought it would be nice to forget for one night, and I do have feelings for Vincent, but he hasn't been around much recently, so—" "You thought it'd be nice to have a distraction for a night," Reno surmised. I winced. "Sorry." He laughed and shrugged. "Your reason wasn't nearly as bad as mine. You weren't lying to me," he said. We both sat in silence for a minute. "Now what?" I asked him. "Well, I definitely don't feel like facing Elena right now," Reno muttered nervously, eyes flitting to the door. "Ditto me for Vincent," I shivered and looked to the window, where Chaos was likely perched, waiting for me to leave the party. "So, how do we escape?" I asked him. The redhead grinned suddenly and stood, hands on his hips. "Babe, I'm not a Turk for nothing. Trust me, I can get us out of this." Suddenly, someone began banging on the door from outside, and I heard Elena shouting, "Reno, is that you? Open this door now!" I glanced from the door to the window. "Great, so how is the Turk getting us out of this?" I asked him nervously. He looked pretty nervous, too. He started looking around frantically, for some way out, a door to another room or something. I heard Reno cheer and turn back to him. Grabbing my hand, he pulled me to the opposite wall, still ignoring Elena's commotion outside. There was a bookshelf on the wall. Reno began reading titles, looking for something. "A book?" I asked. "Nope." He smirked, reaching up and pulling on one novel. "A secret door." He was right. Suddenly the room was spinning as the bookshelf turned into a revolving door. It spun around and we both entered a new room, an office that looked like it hadn't been used in a while. What was that put in for? Lots of Shinra buildings have those kind of doors. Sometimes just because Rufus wants a way to avoid people. You know, executives he doesn't want to talk to or something. I remembered the Shinra mansion and the secret bookshelf doorway that led to the basement. Cool. Still, Reno didn't rest. Come on, we'd better go. She probably knows about this door, too. We walked towards the exit, which Reno opened, and then promptly slammed shut. Apparently she does know about this exit, I sighed, and she knew where it went to. Reno, get out here now! Leave me alone, he complained childishly. I rolled my eyes as he grabbed my hand and pulled me away. Why am I being dragged along? I could leave you to her, I told him. But I want to help save you from Vincent. Well, okay, he was kind of helping. I decided to pity him and go along with his weirdness anyway. So he held tight to my hand, and I let Reno pull me towards another door at the other end of the office. We raced out of it just as Elena turned the corner and shouted at us. Reno! This way! He pulled me into a stairwell and began pounding down the steps. The man was like a lightning bolt. If he hadn't been holding on to me so tightly, I would have been left behind. Apparently, his lady love was just as fast, as I heard heels clicking quickly on the stairs behind us. Reno led me through the door to the levels below, and we came into a hallway lined with offices. Come on! He turned left and pulled me down the hall, then into another office. Ducking behind the wall, he glanced out to look for Elena. When the stairwell door opened, he jumped back into the office. All was quiet for a moment. Then I heard more high heels clicking, but they were fading away. A minute later, he glanced around. Coast looks clear. He took my hand again and led me back to the stairway. Quickly and quietly, we snuck back in and raced up the stairs towards the party. Whew! He sighed in relief once we were back in the ballroom. I think we're safe. Come on, let's go find the guys. He let go of my hand, but offered me his arm. I let out a sigh of relief. Maybe now we can actually enjoy this party, I told him. This time we didn't have to race around through empty hallways. We took a moment to get drinks, and we both lost our first ones, and a plate of cheese and crackers. Reno led me to a small room where Song, Rude, and a few others I didn't know were gathered. Two things happened when we entered the room. Firstly, two yellow eyes became visible from outside. Chaos had obviously been following us. Secondly, one of Reno's more drunken friends cheered when we entered the room. Ha-ha! Kiss! I blanched. What? Reno's friends hooted and hollered, but for Rude and Song, who merely chuckled, one of them pointed at the doorframe. Reno and I both glanced up. My heart plummeted to my feet, and nervous butterflies were born in my stomach. There was mistletoe hanging over us. Come on, Reno, don't leave the lady hanging, one man laughed. Reno glanced at him and chuckled nervously. I quickly leaned towards him. This is not the best thing to be doing if you don't want Elena to cut off your boy parts and feed them to you. I know! Then he sighed and shrugged. What could it hurt? For tonight, you're my date. We could have fun. My throat tightened, and I began to panic. I glanced from the cheering group of Shinra employees to the leering demon outside to the redhead in front of me. To my surprise, I really didn't want to kiss him. Really, I just wanted to run out of this party and back to Vincent's arms, even if he was currently homicidal. My eyes drifted to him outside and remained on him. Even in his strange demonic form, he was startlingly beautiful. A strange bubbling feeling rose in my chest towards my throat. Suddenly, the room was hot as a sauna, and I felt my hands trembling. At that moment, all I wanted to do was leave and return to Vincent somehow. What was this burning sensation threatening to swallow me up? A gentle hand took hold of my chin and turned my face. Reno was smirking lightly at me. I guess he took the red blush on my face as embarrassment. In slow motion, I watched him lean in, as if he was going to press his lips against mine. I panicked, bolting away back from him, and in the next moment, chaos truly did erupt. Two loud noises erupted. A shriek of indignant rage came from the ballroom. Reno! The redhead spun around to see a blonde blur careening through the crowd towards him. From the windows came a sudden roar so thunderous the window panes shook. I turned to see Vincent, wings unfurled, beating on the window, his eyes set on me. Shivering, I turned to the window. This party sucked. All I'd done was run around barefoot. My feet ached, my legs ached, I still hadn't gotten to eat anything, and I just wanted to go home. I took a step towards the window where Vincent was, when suddenly Reno grabbed my hand and raced away again, dragging me unwillingly behind him. Come on, he shouted. I was so tired of being dragged around like a doll. Reno, let me go. I don't think he heard me. We raced through the party out to a stairwell, and this time Reno raced upward. I cursed as we ran, my poor feet burning up. We finally went up a few levels, and I managed to pull my hand free. Let's split up, I told him. Then without waiting for his response, I raced off around a corner and promptly fell to my feet. It took a moment to catch my breath. Chest heaving, I pulled my legs up and rested my chin on my knees. Everything hurt, and my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since lunch. This party was supposed to be a distraction, not a marathon. Reno, though I understood his misled intentions, hadn't been the wonderful date I'd hoped he'd be. And now Vincent would probably be pissed with me for life, especially since I'd been romantic with the enemy or something. I'd had a horrible night and probably lost a good friend because of it. A few tears snuck out of my eyes. Surprised, I sat up and wiped them away. Where'd that come from? I was being an idiot. All I had to do was find Vincent and explain, and we could go home, and I could finally eat. So I stood and glanced around. There was one problem with my plan. I had no idea where the hell I was. If I could just find an elevator. Lost. Startled, I jumped and spun around. My heart settled down when I saw a familiar figure stepping out of the darkness. Oh, Mr. Song. It occurred to me I didn't really know his last name. The man chuckled at my stumble. Song is fine, he smiled. I couldn't help but smile back. Despite Song being the dangerous leader of the Turks, I knew from playing Crisis Core he could also be a good friend. I really did like him. I nodded. Yeah, I escaped Reno, but got lost on the way. He approached and chuckled. Escaped? He asked, an inquisitive look on his face. Wasn't he your date? Sighing, I shook my head. In the end, we were both just using each other. He was trying to get Elena's attention, and I was trying to escape my problems. Did it work? He asked. Nope. I huffed and crossed my arms. They're just following me. Well, I can't help you with that, but I can show you the way out. Then, like a gentleman, Song offered me his arm. That was more like it. Song was more my type than Reno anyway. I liked pale skin, lined by dark hair. We began walking down the hall peacefully. I couldn't hear anything from the party downstairs, and it was the first nice moment of the night. I let out a sigh of relief. So you're the girl from another world. I winced at the comment. I guess everybody knows that now? He shook his head. Only myself, my boss, and Reno. He can keep his mouth shut when he wants to. Relief flooded me and I smiled. Whew, that's good to know, though I guess it must be kind of strange to think about. I looked up to see Song considering it. I've heard of many strange things while working here. Your story is one of the strangest, I must admit, he smirked. We fell quiet for a moment. Song wasn't the most outgoing man, and I didn't really know what to say to him. Eventually, he spoke to me. I suppose you're the reason the building has had a demon outside circling it all night. I nodded and chuckled, a little embarrassed. I angered one of my friends coming here. Looking back, it was probably a stupid mistake, and I don't know if he'll forgive me. To my surprise, Song gripped my hand a little tighter. He would not be a good friend if he didn't, he said, smiling. My nerves calmed a little, and I returned the smile. The man opened a door and led me outside. Then he followed me out onto a balcony many, many feet above the ground below. Wait, how do I get home from here? I turned to ask him. Song smirked and glanced at the sky. I followed his gaze, a little confused. My eyes moved left, and I noticed a gargoyle nearby. Strange, I hadn't seen any on the building from below, and this building wasn't really old enough to have that sort of decoration. I scrutinized the statue, but it was in the shadows and hard to see. Something about it made me nervous, so I turned away. A shadow fell over me then, a tall one with large wings. My body seized up as I realized how exactly I was supposed to go home. Glancing back, I saw the gargoyle had stood up, yellow eyes trained on me. I turned back and looked at Song with wide, fearful eyes shivering. "He's gonna kill me!" I whispered fearfully. The beating of wings behind me made me even more nervous. He is right to be mad. Coming here was dangerous. Luckily for you, not all of Shinra's employees are cruel. But his approach was intimidating. Both of you have been rather difficult to one another. Song glanced up at Vincent behind me. You should have a long talk. Since when did Song become Dr. Phil? Sighing, I nodded. I knew he was right. So, still a little nervous, I turned to face my friend. Vincent, or Chaos, or perhaps both, was crouching on the railing, arm resting on one knee, his yellow eyes drilling holes into me, but he seemed to have calmed down a little. I took a step toward him and shyly raised my hand. His gloved hand took mine, while his other arm wrapped around my waist. Vincent adjusted me in his arms until I was resting gently against his chest. Then we were off into the sky, heading home, finally. Flying is fun as long as you don't look down. Even if you aren't afraid of heights, being that high up can rip the air from your lungs. My heart hammered in my chest as I held Vincent tighter. I won't drop you. They? Promised, arms wrapped around me tighter. I nodded against his neck. We flew on in silence a little longer before I glanced down and noticed we weren't soaring over edge. The ruins of Midgar were below us. Confused, I asked Vincent why. I didn't want to talk around Tifa and the others, he explained. After a moment, we began circling lower and lower. Soon he gently landed on his feet, folding up his wings behind him. I let out a sigh of relief. He helped me back to my feet and reached into his gun holster. There was no weapon inside, but instead, I laughed when he removed the high heels I'd left behind. Thanks. He handed them over with a smirk. I'm not sure they'll be any more comfortable than running around barefoot, he commented with a chuckle. Yeah, you're probably right. I took the shoes anyway, holding them instead of putting them on. We stood in silence. I noticed, after a moment, we were standing outside of Aerith's church. Want to go inside? I asked. I led the way in, quickly moving to sit, setting the shoes aside. It felt nice to rest. Vincent, still in his chaos form, entered and stood nearby. I guessed his wings were hard to sit with, which made me wonder. Why are you still like that? I asked. Yellow eyes fell on me and I became lost in them. The vibrant, strange color was breathtaking. Vincent had a lot of power in his eyes. Chaos refuses to leave. Both of us are struggling for control, and when I'm emotional, I find it hard to keep him back. He finally did sit, though it was difficult for him. He had to move his wings up out of the way as he tried getting comfortable. Why did you flip out like that? I mean... Sighing, I brushed a hand through my hair. Okay, Shinra's dangerous. I shouldn't have gone, but you really lost it. Vincent's dark skin turned darker, almost as if he were blushing. Sighing, he suddenly gripped his arm. Shinra has that effect on me. I can't let them hurt anyone else I care about. His concern touched me, but still, couldn't he have controlled his temper better? Well, you don't need to worry about me ever going near Shinra again, I muttered bitterly. Confused, he glanced over and seemed to understand from my glum expression. The date did not go well. That's an understatement. I began pulling out the annoying earrings I had on. While I did, I explained to him about the debacle, how Reno had pulled me along through his madness. I skimmed over some of the feelings I'd had while thinking of Vincent, of course, and when I told about how Reno almost kissed me, he really did growl. The yellow in his eyes grew brighter. He didn't hurt you, did he? Vincent looked tense, like he might leap up and attack if I gave the wrong answer. No, of course not. It's just not as fun as I hoped it would be. Sighing, I set my earrings and other jewelry with my shoes and stood, beginning to pace. Vincent watched me closely. Did you care for him? I sputtered. No, not really. He's a nice guy, but no. Vincent, though he was right in front of me, suddenly appeared in my mind's eye. Why did he keep doing that? I just really wanted to have fun. Instead, it became a total hassle. Huffing, I kneeled by the flowers at the front of the church. They'd somehow survived the flood from months back. I apologized. That was partly my fault. Vincent approached me slowly. But you must understand, no matter what changes about Shinra, at the core, it is a company that attracts evil men. Anyone would be a fool to enter that building unguarded, but you especially. I had known that this would be coming, but I bared it anyway. Since he had flown around outside all night due to his concern for me, I figured the least I could do was listen. Then he said my name softly, and I turned to look at him again. A mixture of anguish and pain filled his expression and confused me. Concerned, I ran over to him. You all right? When he looked at me next, a chill ran through my limbs that stemmed from both fear and nervous excitement. The feeling traveled through me like lightning, and I couldn't look away. Vincent's eyes were burning into me, and he was growling lightly. Shocked, I backed away a little. Vincent? I didn't get far before in a flash his hand took hold of my upper arm. It was a vice grip, and I couldn't move. Fear hit me then. Had Vincent lost it? Was chaos in control? I tried to discern the truth by staring into his eyes. What's going on, Vincent? Not right now. Vincent, or should I say Chaos, murmured huskily. He is awake and watching, but not in control. Chaos explained as he took a step towards me. I couldn't move, not only because he was holding me in place, but because my shivering legs wouldn't. Oh, hello, Chaos, I whispered. We were standing so very close that I felt Chaos's breath against my cheek when he chuckled. He leaned in and murmured against my ear, "Hello." Another shiver traveled down my spine. I was losing the ability to stay standing. What was happening? A minute ago, we'd been having a normal conversation. Now I wasn't sure what was going on. He was way too close for comfort. My heart was beating like a drum in my ears. A mixture of attraction and fear, driving me nuts. What's going on? I asked again. Chaos's hand, which had been holding my arm lightly, was now traveling over my skin in a gentle caress. Vincent doesn't often get emotional. When he does, it's almost impossible for him to stay in control. Chaos's other arm was suddenly around my waist. It was all surprisingly gentle. I get that, but what are you... I slowly lifted my chin and saw that I was now a millimeter from Chaos's, Vincent's, perfect lips. Why am I touching you? He finished with a smirk. His hand lightly traced my spine. Because Vincent won't. He denies himself such pleasures even though he wants them. You mean he wants me? I have to stop right there. Because they make out. And I'm not going to read 12-year-old's awkward writing of a makeout scene with a monster. But I was horny for a monster, and I wrote the makeout scene with the monster. And they make out. Okay, at the end of the makeout, she says something about, you don't, seem to speak as if being with me is not disgusting, meaning Chaos, not just Vincent. I surprised him when I answered, it's not. He blinked, unable to respond for a moment, before his demonic aura began to disappear. The yellow eyes faded to red, and the dark skin became pale again. Vincent reappeared. I could see the exhaustion on his face. Once Chaos was gone, Vincent let out a groan and collapsed against my chest, asleep before he'd finished falling. I caught him. Ooh, I was so confused, and I wanted to talk to him, but I'd have to wait until he was rested. I thought we had problems before, but now we really needed to talk, since Chaos had told me he wanted me. My face flushed with shame, and I hung my head. Adjusting Vincent, I pulled him into my lap. Tired as I was, I didn't feel like lugging him all the way back to Edge. Looked like I wasn't going to get to eat that night, since I didn't have my cell phone on me. But a moment later, I had Vincent and I resting comfortably next to the garden of flowers. I wrapped my arms around him and pulled him close, closing my eyes. Usually I'd feel uncomfortable sleeping out in the open, but I had a feeling we would be very safe within Aerith's church. And in seconds, I was fast asleep. The end. What even? What? Okay. Oh man, there's so many things to talk about this story and just the wild ride of it. So much that clearly I was working through in things I was experimenting with and trying to figure out. The story never went any further. I never wrote more of it. Oh, excuse me. I think my original plan had been something like my character would help Vincent through the events of Dirge of Cerberus, which was a brand new game at the time, and having foreknowledge of things that was going to happen were going to let me, help Vincent to stop bad guys from being bad or something. And then at the end of all of that, I would be spirited away back home. But at the end of my mortal life back home, I would be spirited away again back to Midgar because Vincent's immortal and I could spend immortal life with him and his demon pals. That was it. Yep. That fic has so many layers. So many weird layers. Weird layers. Oh, man. And it was all just so I could write myself making out with Chaos. So I was a little monster fucker. Little 12-year-old monster fucker. Wanted to make out with a demon. And literally that's like the last bit I wrote. Oh my god, so much. I'm a little overwhelmed with how bad that was. I forgot how weird. Oh man. Thank you all for surviving with me through that. The next story we're going to read is along similar lines. It is a 30-chapter long completed story about a original character, not a self-insert the way that this one was quite literally just me, but an original character who, I guess, if I remember right, gets, Sephiroth wakes up in her house. Sephiroth's in her house in the real world after the events of Advent Children, and, yeah, it's a romance with Sephiroth. Yeah. I don't know if I was exactly 12. I think it was middle school, late middle school, so maybe 14? I don't know. I could probably math it all out if I wanted to, but in my brain, all of these are from when I was 12. It's just what I imagine in my head is little idiot fanfic, because that's when I started writing, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, next week we'll start Sephiroth's story, which promises to also be delightful. That will be fun. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to members. Phil, Pablo, Jeff, I think might have been here earlier. All of you, thank you so much for supporting the channel. We're going to be watching Modal Zushi, which is a gay anime, in a bit. Probably at 5, I think. I'm going to go eat dinner. It's so much fun. It's so good, and we have so much fun picking on it and making fun and joking around with it. So join Discord if you want to hang out with us and goof off and watch anime. And I will see you guys tomorrow, I think, for Soma at like noonish. Until then, bye.